pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everybody. We're expecting our third board member to be here shortly, but we'll go ahead with some of the other informational items in the meantime. Art is excused tonight. He's ill, and Craig is out of town, so they're both excused. All right. How about we listen to our student board?
Okay, so at the school for DECA, we had our area conference. It actually got canceled. So those of us that placed within the top 9 on our tests got to go to state. So we are excited for that, and we are preparing. Yeah.
Great. All right, thank you. What about you?
Well, didn't we go to our joint meeting of the school board? That's what I went to in Shelton a week or so ago. And just this week, I had one of these collateral blessings or benefits that comes from being on a school board. I got a special email late Tuesday night, and it was from a student whose name I will leave out of this account. And the message went something like this: that I've been looking on the web, I saw your picture, and you look like a nice man. I have attached a calendar of weather, and as you see, tomorrow it is going to snow. I would urge you to call off school tomorrow. And if you don't call off school, think of the lives you will mess up because of scheduling. Think of the lives you will set at risk by having school at such a dangerous time. And besides, surely you remember what it was like to be a student and how happy it would make one feel when there's no school. Courteously, cordially, and then it had the student's name. You can't pay for stuff like that, and you can't make it up, and it made me feel just really good, so full of power that I would be able to call off school, and such an interesting argument, including both the positive, a certain quasi-veiled threat, and then an appeal, to common joy. And perhaps whoever the student is, it is the next Spencer Pruitt in making.
That's awesome. Well, I applaud that student for sending that letter, actually. That's good. We're going to skip over our action items since we don't have a quorum until Leanna is here. And we'll move to, let's go to the Feller land transfer update.
Perfect. So we have been talking with Department of Fish and Wildlife about a transfer of the Feller wetlands portion to their state department because they can better manage it for our community members. And tonight we have Derek Lowry from the Department of Fish and Wildlife and Mindy Harlow from the Salmon Center. I won't get all the letters right, so I'm abbreviating it to that, Mindy, to talk about some of the work that they've been doing to put together a way for Fish and Wildlife to consider taking that on. So Derek and Mindy, for yours. However you want to do that.
I wanted just to provide an update since the last board meeting that I attended where we discussed the potential for transferring the Feller lands and heard public input.
Could you speak up just a little?
Certainly. So I just wanted to follow up to where we stand with our agency's review of the potential land transfer and acquisition. Right now we're right in the middle of what we call our Lands 2020 process, which is where we consider potential or applications that have come in internally for lands that could be included into the WDFW portfolio of lands that we manage for Fish and Wildlife Resources. And so right now that's being reviewed. The public comment period has been completed. And on February 6th through 8th, and I think it's going to be on the 7th, our commission will have an opportunity to have those properties that are being considered to be acquired presented to them for comment. And then following that meeting, our director will make a decision on whether those lands will be moved forward to head down the path of potential acquisition. And so just wanted to update that I have no answers at this point, but here in the coming month we should know what our director has decided. And I wish I had the public comment gathered together to share that with you. The word that I've gotten is it's positive thus far, which really coincides or is consistent with the comments that we received at the board meeting where we discussed and heard public input on the potential transfer. And so that's my update. No answers, but just you know, we're continuing to move it through. Everything looks positive on our end that we've gotten thus far.
Great, thank you.
Great. So we've been partnering with the Department of Fish and Wildlife to address the levee breach. So we've been, I've prepared some visuals on the screen, and I don't know, is there a clicker or a pointer?
Sure.
Oh, great. Fantastic. Thank you. So this photo on the screen is an aerial oblique photo that is taken from the north looking onto both the Hood Canal Salmon Enhancement Group property and the Feller property. And the next slide shows the location of the levee breach. Thank you. So that circle there shows the breach in the levee location. And then the next slide is a closer look. So we can see that the levee actually used to serve as a barrier between a man-made freshwater pond and the estuary. And it served as a surface for the trail since the 1990s. So I don't know exactly when it happened, but sometime after 2014, the tide gate and associated culverts started to fail. So this is a photo that was taken in 2014. So in 2015, we worked with the North Mason School District to install a temporary bridge over that part of the trail because it was becoming too narrow because of the erosion that was occurring, so it wasn't really safe for trail walkers. So this worked for a few years, and unfortunately in 2017, ultimately the levee ended up eroding away so much that the bridge was no longer working and the trail had to be closed. So the bridge has been removed since 2017. So yeah, these are some of the high tide pictures that were taken in 2018. So basically anytime that there's a high tide, more of the material from the levee is eroded away because of the amount of water that enters into what used to be a freshwater pond. So now the trail's being routed onto Roselle Road, which is a county road, and that can cause some problems with safety with trail walkers, but also the lack of a levee in place is causing severe flooding of Roselle Road. So this is a photo that was taken at 2:45 p.m. on December 20th of 2018, which wasn't even supposed to be a high tide day. It was that there was a storm surge that caused a lot of wave action that pushed a lot of water up onto Roselle Road from Hood Canal, basically. And then this was a photo that was taken this morning at 9 o'clock, 20 minutes before a high tide. So we didn't really have a big storm surge today, but we did have quite a bit of snow melt. But the issue is definitely creating access issues for the residential tenants that live on that property, and then also flooding the road and also causing septic issues for the trailer park that is the Golden Bell Trailer Park. Their septic drain field is at the bottom of the hill there, so it gets inundated with water anytime there's a flooding issue. So in 2014, the North Mason School District commissioned some preliminary engineering for fixing the issue with an engineer named Pat McCullough. And then that engineering report was reviewed by a third-party engineering firm in 2016. And basically, that report developed 5 different alternatives that could be used to fix the problem. And basically, it was determined that option 2 was the only viable option because option 1, 3, 4, and 5 are either not permittable because it's currently an estuary. So currently there's saltwater going in there. There's been documented use of salmonids using that freshwater pond, what used to be a freshwater pond, so it can no longer be converted back to a freshwater pond. So, the one issue, or the one alternative number 5 is a self-regulating tide gate, but that creates a lot of maintenance issues, which folks really don't want to take on. So it really makes sense to fix the problem by removing the existing levee and putting in a setback levee and building a partial boardwalk out into the estuary. So next slide, thanks. So we're seeking funding to basically reroute the trail, to remove the 825 foot of existing levee along the west side and 425 foot of levee along the south side, and then put in a setback levee adjacent to Roselle Road and build up the existing access road that exists on the Theller property right now. Right now it sits at about 3 feet lower than what is needed for flood protection. So some upcoming funding opportunities that we have are through the Recreation and Conservation Office and the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. And we have existing funding commitments from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, from Mason County, and from 2 private foundations. So the 2 funding sources, Recreation and Conservation Office and the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, require a landowner acknowledgement form, which is basically just a form that a landowner signs indicating that they are aware that this project is being proposed on their property. So I have sent a copy of that to Dana as well as Denise to see if the board would be willing to consider that in the future for signing so that we can move forward with a fix to that levee problem. So that's what I have.
We have tentatively put that discussion and vote on the February agenda.
Okay. So the Roselle Road that goes down there that's flooded right now
Yes.
is a private road.
No, so it's only private to our gate. So Roselle
Okay.
Road is the county road until it gets to our gate. The part that is flooded the most is the county part of the road. It does flood a little bit onto our private road, but the majority of the flooding occurs on the county-owned part of the road.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that why the county is going to give you some funding for
Yes.
that? Okay.
Yes.
Do you have any questions?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. We'll discuss this further at the February meeting and.
Just looking at your map, and as a regular walker, it will be a good thing when that trail gets rerouted. Because at present, you know, when we walk simply on Roselle Road, though the traffic is quite reasonable, there's always a car coming, and so, or the possibility of one. So I look forward to hopefully some productive resolution that will be in the interests of everyone, particularly walkers.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, and thank you for coming all this way.
Here, here, yeah.
Thank you. Are there any comments from the audience? Or questions?
Yes, I'd like. So I'm Phil Wolf, Alan. Yeah, I would just urge the board to give the Family Center what they need as far as the land use authorization. And just a little kind of, you know, just a little clarification. I'm on the Transportation Improvement Committee for Mason County Roads. Okay. And I'm there as a pedestrian cyclist. And so there's money set aside, there's a relatively small amount of money set aside for trails. And so that's how this money is coming. So not only, yes, we'll protect the county road, that money is for trails. And I see someday that one of the worst areas to ride a bicycle is between, probably Feller, going by QFC, going on the very narrow section of North, Shore Road. So someday, Mindy has promised me that I will be able to ride my road bicycle between Feller and, and the North Shore Road. And someday that trail will connect to the state park is kind of the vision. And so just eliminating that very hazardous section of road for pedestrians would be fabulous. It would also be, for school kids and everything else to use that as an access. And, when I'm in my role on the Transportation Committee, I'm not just an advocate for trails, I'm an advocate for trails used as transportation. That's the best use of transportation money, in my opinion, for trails. So, I urge the board to move forward with Fish and Wildlife on the transfer, because the money I pay for school taxes, the taxes I pay should go towards education. And not, though I love trails, not to trails, right? Others, and, there are other entities that manage trails and can, and can receive that grant.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else?
If I could just add to what Phil says, I look forward, all things being equal and the deal being a good one, when you and I can ride triumphantly on the trail on our bicycles.
Okay, thanks, Don. All right, we're going to back up on the agenda. We passed all the action items up until you got here.
Thank you, and I apologize.
No
for being
problem.
pulled up.
No problem. So let's go back to approval of the agenda. I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Madam Chairman, I move that we approve the agenda as given.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Did you already take out the thing for her evaluation? You took that out already, okay.
It's gone. Oh, the executive session?
Yeah.
It's still on my printed form. But
Oh,
we won't be doing it. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, let's move on to, do you have any board member comments that you'd like to make?
just a great big, another apology for my.
Okay,
my
that's
hold
fine.
up. That's it.
How about you? Any comments, Morgan?
Oh, also an apology for my lateness.
That's okay, I'm just pointing you guys out. Okay, thank you. Hawkins Middle School presentation.
Good evening. Robert Callahan, the principal. My assistant principal is Luke Grumberg, and these are my counselors, Rebecca Roberts and Mirka Kachalstat. And so one of the things I'm really enjoying at Hawkins has been the student roundtables that are happening. And there's been some great questions and discussions that have come up from the kids. And one of the things that came up in almost every single roundtable has been this question of what we call our socio-emotional curriculums that we're doing in our schools. And so what I wanted to present here was a piece of that social-emotional curriculum that we have been doing called mindfulness. And I'm going to turn this over to my counselors who know this the best and are the ones that lead this with the staff to do it with the kids during the days, every day at school. So I'm going to turn it over.
All right, thank you.
I don't know quite where to stand.
Right here.
Come on up. All right, so, well, thank you for having us. And like Robert said, my name is Mirka Kachalstat, and this is Rebecca, the other counselor. And so we wanted to talk about mindfulness and why we are doing mindfulness, why we are really believing in it, and the benefits of it. So So when we talk kind of about what we are doing, we're gonna look at a little bit of snapshot of our school demographic, and then we're gonna talk about what is mindfulness and why it matters, and some of our mindful practices that we do at Hawkins.
All right, so if you want to look, I don't know if it's easier to see over here or behind you. So we just wanted to give you a snapshot. We know you live here, you see these students, but sometimes it's hard to communicate for us who are working with these kids every day exactly kind of what we're up against. So we just pulled a couple of slides from our Healthy Youth Survey, which was, this is from the 18-19 school year, so it's the most recent one. And then we also pulled just a kind of summary from our SABRS, our Social Academic Behavior Risk Screener that we did. The one that we'll show you is from fall. This slide that you're looking at was so this is student reporting on themselves. So this is basically showing that 38% of our 8th graders reported feeling so sad or hopeless almost every day for 2 weeks or more in a row that they stopped doing usual activities. And then the green is the compared to other small schools statewide. So the blue is us. This slide is showing that 33% of our 8th graders reported having seriously considered suicide in the past year, compared to 19% of other small schools statewide. And then this is a snapshot from our fall SABRS. So what you're looking at is on the left 4 columns are the teacher report. So teachers fill out this survey on an assigned group of their students. And then the right 4 columns are the students self-reporting on themselves. So this is all grades 6, 7, and 8, a combined total. The blue is students who are reporting at risk, and the orange is the percentage of students who are showing not at risk. So at the bottom, you'll see from left to right, the total behavior score. So 24% of our students are presenting as behaviorally at risk, 24% socially at risk, 27% academically, and 47% emotionally as reported by teachers. On the right, you'll see students self-reporting themselves. 45% are reporting that they're at risk behaviorally, 32% socially, 38% academically, and 81% of our students report being emotionally at risk. So you can obviously see that some of those numbers are pretty significant. When students are coming to school in a state of mind that is what we're seeing on the screen, especially the 81% emotionally at risk, they're not coming conducive to a state of learning. And it's something that we try to combat every day. We have amazing students who come to school despite some of the things that they're going through, but they're 12 and 13 and 14, and it's a lot for them to handle.
So before we had SABRS, and we kind of had it, you know, on a graph, on a piece of paper, kind of really had some data. We knew that we had a lot of students that were struggling, and they were not getting what, you know, teachers were trying to teach them. It was not sinking in. And so kind of how we got to mindfulness at Hawkins is actually, it started in our special ed program about 3 years ago. And then I started also through my small counseling groups, experimenting with that. And then we kind of saw results with that, and how it helped with students' behavior and focus. And so we decided to bring it school-wide and start implementing mindfulness practices through some of the activities for all students. And so just kind of like, just the definition of what is mindfulness that we are using at school is, specific definition is mindfulness means maintaining a present moment awareness of our thoughts, feelings, bodily sensations, or surrounding environment. And it's also focusing on nurturing of positive states of mind, such as kindness, empathy, and compassion, using breath, body, and brain. So that's kind of the definition of mindfulness, how we are looking at it at school. What mindfulness isn't, or how we are not using it at our school, it's not a discipline tactic. It doesn't mean only calmness and happiness. It's definitely not a quick fix. It's not absence of thought, and it's nothing religious. And so here's just a really quick history of mindfulness practice and the research. So there's a lot of years of research behind mindfulness, and it first started in healthcare, then it moved to mental health, and then finally it made its way to education. So that's just a little history of that.
So when we use mindfulness and teach students mindfulness, what we're doing is helping create a space to replace impulsive reactions with thoughtful responses. So it does that every time, sorry. I didn't put that in there, I don't know why it does that. So without mindfulness, somebody might call you a name. Most people would automatically react by responding with calling that person back another name. It usually escalates to an argument, which we know with middle schoolers can turn into a fight. When students have been taught mindfulness and they practice it and buy into it, a student can call them a name. They have a space where they now can choose their reaction. They take that deep breath, and then they're able to choose their response. So they might choose to walk away. They might choose to go get an adult. They might choose not to engage with that student where previously they would have. The benefits supported by 30 years of research in neuroscience, improved cognitive outcomes, so executive functions, that's kind of that planning, following directions step by step, focus, improved concentration, improved ability to regulate your own emotions, increased compassionate attitudes and behavior, empathy, reduction in test anxiety, stress, anxiety in general, depression, and PTSD. So we're going to just kind of show two components. So our counseling program is heavily based in teaching students how to regulate their own emotions. We all know as educators that we can't solve the majority of these students' problems that they're coming in with. But what we can do is teach them that they can overcome whatever emotion it is they're having, and they can learn how to manage themselves. So we use mindfulness as a key approach to working with our students. So these photos up here, you're just kind of looking at some pieces of what we have in our program and then posted around the school. So we use intentional movement, outlets for frustration and anger. We use tools that kind of affect all 5 senses. So we teach them how to breathe. We teach them about scent, vision, hearing. We have relaxing things. And then we use music and sound a lot to help them kind of focus their attention.
And then as far as the school-wide approach, we have a couple components to it. So one of them is we have scheduled mindfulness during the first 10 minutes of every day. And I would say that this is something that definitely sets Hawkins apart from a lot of schools in our state or even nationwide. So we have the first 10 minutes of every day set for mindfulness, where teachers can incorporate different activities, and we'll talk about them later. Other times when we use mindfulness is during transitions, and that can be when kids come back from lunch, when they're all crazy and they need to kind of settle down to learn, or during class time between different activities when it's different energy level necessary, or as teachers need throughout the day. So those are the times when we typically use mindfulness or mindful activities. And some of them are on the bullets. Those are breathing and guided meditation, mindful movement, stretching, connection and connectivity, community activities, gratitude, and then we also do a direct teaching about the brain and how it functions and how it impacts our emotions and behavior.
It's always amazing. I was just thinking last week I had a 6th grader who sat in my office and almost got into a fight in class. But when I started talking to him about his, how his amygdala was kind of taking over. He could take that sentence and he totally ran with it and said, yeah, it's taking over and my prefrontal cortex is shutting down and I need strategies to help me be able to take back control. And he only knows that because we've taught it at camp. The teachers use the stuff we give them and they are so passionate about learning about their brain. They don't always act like it, but most people love to know how that works and how they can be in control of it. So.
And here are a couple pictures from our classrooms where teachers teaching focused meditation and movement. And then on the lower picture, it's kind of a focused challenge. So those are just from a couple of the different activities.
The students a lot of times come up with their own, that once they have a few in their repertoire, they can tell the teacher, let's do this one. And they get to know what they need and what helps them, which is really awesome. Oh, sorry. So we thought that it would be fun. This is something, mindfulness and how we use it at Hawkins is hard to measure because it takes a lot of time, practice, and consistency to make it something that you just do. And so it's, with staff coming in and out, staff teaching in different ways, students coming in and out, it's hard to really connect it to one thing to show you, oh, this is what it's impacting. It really impacts everything. But we thought, we could at least show you what some of our kids say, which is pretty fascinating. I don't know, Denise, can you click on one video? I don't.
Like over here?
Like there should be like a play button or.
Is it YouTube?
I'm not sure.
I'm not even sure I have the sound on.
These focus exercises, are they done in every classroom or is it a focused group of children?
Oh, here it is. Sorry.
What was that?
He loves it. Mindfulness makes me calm and tired, and I love it. So a lot of times kids will say after an activity, I feel tired, and really what they mean is they feel calm
And relax.
and they just don't know how to express that.
Yeah.
And so we hear that a lot. Let's see if we can click the other one.
Hi, I'm Tatiana. I was talking about how I practice management. And I feel stressed, I practice management. And then it's my hand shaking. It makes me feel calm.
I'm 14 and I'm in 8th grade. Mindfulness is the art of calming yourself and bringing yourself to the present to enjoy life better. How does it help? Well, it helps you to slow down and look at the world. Also, it helps for you to control your emotions. So the difference is, well, then I was very impulsive and if I was angry, I would just blow up and I made a lot of mistakes. And now I just breathe and I'm actually very calm when I'm dealing with stressful situations. So because I learned mindfulness strategies to help me control my emotions, it bettered my life. For the future, it could help me with my jobs, friendship, family, money, thinking, focusing, enjoying life to its fullest, and then everything.
That's a lot of information.
Yeah, she's a handful. So your question about does every class do focused activity? So teachers, we kind of give them a bank of activities. We also do this with staff. So this is not just something that we have teachers teaching, but we actually have staff practice these things. And the thing with mindfulness is you really have to experience it enough to know how it impacts you before you're going to be able to teach it. And so we lead staff through activities all the time, and then they take those activities and they kind of develop a bank, so to speak, of activities. So a lot of teachers like the more movement-based things, whereas some might like the guided relaxations or just sitting peacefully and quiet for a couple of minutes. So any class can do those. This just happened to be a class that did a movement-based activity almost every day.
Nice.
And so the students were like, Ms. Roberts, let's do a plane challenge. And I was like, okay. And so somebody snapped a picture. But yeah, so they kind of take it and make it their own. And again, it's consistency in teaching. Some of our kids, we still, they haven't quite bought into it yet. But the fact that Hawkins has taken it and built it into the schedule communicates to the kids that it's important. And it really, really is. Until you've sat in the quiet and reflected on your own thoughts for 2 minutes, you don't realize what you're missing. And so that's the thing that we're trying to implement.
So does this reduce discipline issues?
I would say absolutely.
Okay.
That's the hard part is we were trying, you know, we were going to pull, Swiss is where we keep all of our discipline data, and we were going to pull that up. But because we do school-wide social emotional learning as well, and we make that very intentional once or twice a week, it's hard to take this and connect it directly to this is what it's impacting. But we do know that in the last couple of years, we have seen an overall reduction in ODRs, in fights. We don't have a ton of fights at Hawkins. So we definitely have kids that take this on and they use it and they adapt it and they love it. And we even have kids that try and teach their parents some of these things.
Nice.
So
Nice.
that's really the next level.
That's a great outcome. That's a great outcome.
Are you folks aware that you're subverting our entire political culture?
Do you find that there's a certain time of day that this occurs? Is that correct?
The activities?
Yeah.
For sure in the morning.
In the morning, and that would be the advisory class?
Well, it's every day the first 10 minutes.
Okay,
So
every day the
advisory
first 10
twice a
minutes. So that must have been what the students were referring to in the student forum.
Right. They,
Okay.
Some of them will say that they only do it during advisory, and I think if you remember in one of the meetings, all the other students kind of turned to that person and said, what do you mean only on advisories? We do it every day.
Yeah.
And so that kind of, what that told me in listening to the students was there's not a consistency among the teachers in doing this every day in a normal class setting, that some teachers are only seeing it that they do it in advisory. And that's not the intention.
Okay, so that was my next question. Are all the teachers supportive of mindfulness?
I
Do they
would
all
say-
feel like it's?
I would say that the majority of them are in supportive of it.
Okay.
And the others are on board with us.
Okay.
It's, you know, it's one of those things that can be labeled as touchy-feely, and not everybody's comfortable with that. And so one of our jobs is to help the teachers that aren't comfortable with it find where their comfort is and how they can connect with their kids in this type of way.
Okay. Okay. And what about the boys? How do they respond to mindfulness?
I think it really just depends on the student and how it's being taught. So the more a teacher is comfortable with it and the more buy-in a teacher has, the more serious the kids tend to take it. When I used to be at Bellflower Elementary, I did this a lot with 5th grade, and they got to the point where boys and girls, they would ask me to come take their recess and do guided relaxations with them. Because we all bought into it and they realized the benefit of it, and once they did it a couple times, they realized, oh my gosh, I feel really good. So it just depends. I think boys have a hard time sometimes with the eyes closed and being in themselves. And so that, even just that is a skill that again takes so much teaching, and our society is not conducive for that most of the time. So this is definitely out of the box for a lot of people.
Well, especially at that age level too, when they're just trying to figure out who they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's why we are offering lots of different activities so that,
Yeah.
you know, everybody can pick kind of, you know, what fits with them. And, you know, some activities maybe girls don't like and boys like. There are more kind of that movement or, you know, more kind of physical things. So it's just kind of trying to, you know, teach them like, okay, these activities might be for these purposes, these might be for these purposes. Doesn't mean that you will love all of them, but just picking what fits with you for different situation.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's really surprising. I have actually a couple groups of boys who you wouldn't think would be into this, but they try to come down every day. But they come down. I get them in at least once a week, and they have their own little group, and they do movement activities in my room. And I have like these yoga army men, and so they put them out in different poses, and then they'll copy them. I mean, these are 7th and 8th graders, so it's just, again, it's really, once you open their mind to it and it's not a weird or unsafe thing, then they'll participate.
So the graph that you showed us in the very beginning, where the one that struck me obviously was the emotional at risk, 80% or something. How do you measure that this year? You won't have anything, any data? That was the healthy
That was the Sabres.
That was the
Our
Sabres.
risk screening tool that we
Okay.
started using last year.
Okay.
So that survey is under 20 questions, and they're very targeted, very specific questions that students report on themselves. And what we're finding is, because we've started giving it at the elementary level, we are implementing groups based on that data at the very beginning of 6th grade, and what we're finding is that those students were definitely the ones that should have been identified. A lot of what the Sabres does is it pulls out those kids who are kind of the silent sufferers that may be functioning in the classroom, and maybe even academically keeping up, but they are struggling on the inside. Because those are typically the kids, they're not getting office referrals, they're not a behavior problem, so they tend to be ignored. So that was a big part of why we started using that tool.
Okay, so you can literally identify groups of kids or individual kids that you can follow through.
Correct.
Okay.
And we do use them for groups
Great.
and things like that.
And then that's a tool that our schools are using multiple times a year, so they can monitor
Oh, good.
and adjust as
Progress.
needed for those groups of kids.
Awesome.
I have a question. So when you say you pull the kids out, what do you do to help them exactly when you target them?
Yeah, so we use that data to basically design small groups that go from 6 to 8 weeks that focus on typically self-regulation. So again, it's a deeper dive into what are these emotions that I'm experiencing, how do I manage them, and what do I do with them? And then we also offer, based on what the data says, other groups like friendship groups.
Or more academic-based
Yeah,
groups.
behavior, like how to be a student, basically. So yeah, it just
Okay,
depends.
thank you.
Could you say a word about, this objection does not come up here, but it's come up in other parts of the country. This is so close to some religious practices. Could you tell me a little bit about how mindfulness is taught in the classroom?
Like I was saying, like some of those activities that we are doing, it's basically using our brain, body, and breath. And so there's no reference to any of the religious practices. It's literally being in the moment and knowing, like, okay, what is my brain doing? What are my thoughts? Or how is my body feeling? Do I feel aches? Or do I feel, stressed? Or do I feel tensed? Is my breathing shallow, or am I breathing too fast? Do I feel like I'm nervous, anxious? And so just kind of those components, like noticing those, and so then you can do strategies that we are teaching how to put yourself back to kind of the state where you're optimal.
So you frame it in a kind of, for want of a better word, brain wiring kind of context.
Kind of.
We have these bodies, they work in a certain way. We feel this, we feel that, different parts of our brain are operating. And there are moments when we need to take control. And have I got the kind of...
So what I hear in this is more of the physical and scientific knowledge we know about our bodies.
Yeah.
And our emotions and the way we think, as opposed to that spiritual, faith-based piece that people oftentimes attribute to meditation or things like that.
Yeah, that's what I was testing out, and I think this is a very defensible, approach to do it. Though the thing seems to me the same thing, particularly when you mention boys don't like to close their eyes and be quiet. And of course, no matter what you're setting, you try it, close your eyes, be quiet, and think of nothing. Oh, boy.
And that's one of those kind of resources that when we teach teachers how to approach mindfulness, is that if students don't feel comfortable closing their eyes, they don't have to. They don't have to even participate. It's just when you feel comfortable in a classroom, you might participate. But there are certain things that, when teachers are kind of guiding whatever activity they're guiding, it's always voluntarily. It's not like you have to sit here, close eyes, and be quiet, because then that defeats the purpose of, you know.
They can't hijack it.
Right.
But they don't have to fully participate until they're comfortable.
Yeah.
A lot of students are, you know, because of their situations, are afraid to close their eyes. And so we
Really?
acknowledge that. Well, I mean, it's kind of scary for some
Huh.
people.
They're uncomfortable.
They're not comfortable. It's more about, mindfulness really just means being in the present moment. So
Mhm.
really we take that and we just expand on it. And again, I think a lot of kids especially, but even adults, we spend so much time ignoring what we're feeling and
Mhm.
shoving it back down and ignoring what our thoughts are, that they come out eventually. So this is getting ahead of that and trying to teach them that it's okay to feel what you're feeling or have the thought that you're having, acknowledge it, and then learn how to send it away so you can focus on your math test.
I appreciate that years ago when I was in middle school, connecting your emotional with your physical was really, they didn't teach you that. They figured you were learning that at home, where my parents didn't know how to connect their their emotional with their physical. So how was I to learn? So I love that. In middle school, it's where the hormones and all the everything come together from elementaries, and then they come together, and it's just like. So I appreciate that so much. I love that. I think they're doing a good job.
I think it's just a really good way, a good tool for kids to be able to identify different triggers that might be causing them to behave in a certain way or think a certain way. I think it's a great program. Thank you for the presentation. I really appreciate it.
It'll be very interesting to see if this works. I was only partly jesting. We live in a polarized world, and it can become that way instantaneously in any relationship. And it seems to me that something that was part of an educational culture that a child would be exposed to and accepted as normal would be part of a almost automatic habit as an adult. And so I take very seriously what you're talking about. And I'm just wondering, do you really, I mean, I suppose you were going to answer yes, but I mean, that 80-some% figure was shocking. When do you expect to see some effect on that? Or when would it be reasonable for me, as a school board member, trying to make sense of this? Is this a good thing or not? When should I expect to see some change in that chart?
That's a really good question.
Well, you're dealing with different combinations of kids every year. So the 8th grade
I see.
leaves and the new 6th grade comes in, and now you don't have a cohort group that you can follow all the way through. It'd be nice
Although
if you did.
we
but-
do the savers at all grade levels, so you could follow kids through to graduation.
And that's kind of what we were talking about before we came here. Like, how do we measure that, you know, what we do specifically with the mindfulness, like that it works? And we cannot really say like, well, because we do mindfulness, this mindfulness is affecting this, you know, chart, because we are doing so many different things and there's so many different factors, you know, that play a role in it. But I feel like, and it's very hard to measure those things. Obviously, it would be nice to see, you know, kind of when they move to high school, if they can keep practicing and doing those mindfulness activities up to up to graduation, because, you know, it's one thing to teach them, but it's really not until you use it and practice it and, you know, have it, you know, being exposed to it over and over.
So does this stop at a certain grade?
Well, we have 6th, 7th, and 8th, so
Uh-huh.
that's what we can control, and we do it with all of our students. I can't speak to what the high school does. I think some teachers like it and may use it, but I don't know of it being implemented school-wide. So again, we can impact the 3 years or however many years they're with us, and then hope that it's made a big enough impact that they take it with them. Some kids will kind of forget about it if it's not being taught to them all the time, and then they'll come back to it at a later age when they can kind of process, like, oh, remember that thing I tried? I'm gonna try that again. But when we see students who, you know, were being sent out of class every day or engaging in conflict a couple times a week, now they've been with us for a year or two, and now they can take a break and calm themselves down, and they're not getting in fights. I mean, that's really like where we're, you know, that's where the success tells us that it's working. Because most of them are not learning those things at home. So.
Well, I won't detain you. It just seems very interesting to me, and as I hear you talk about it, I mean, I'd like to see this work. Because I think in the high school, particularly in many of the humanities, particularly in argumentation and debate, mindfulness would be a very good thing to have, even when one is in the midst of an agonistic, you know, kind of context, to be mindful in that context. I'm reminded of the fire chief here, and you probably know examples like this better than I do. The old fire chief, Mike Green, talked about coming on an incident. Everybody's in chaos. And when he arrived in that incident, he always felt calm. And he never talked about these things. But it seems to me that there really is, maybe it was just a kind of a personal experience unique to him, but it seems to me this is something, mindful moments or mindfulness actually occurs. There are moments for it where it has made a difference in people's professional lives, you know, beyond you know, just the classroom or the grade. And it seems to me that this is something that should be taken very seriously.
Well, I think we should be mindful of the fact that you've been in school now for 13 hours. So
Yes.
we're going to let you go, and thank you so much for the
Thank you for having us.
presentation.
Thank you.
Nice job, guys.
And I'm
Thank you.
looking forward to the next student forum.
Thanks.
Okay, now we are at consent items, and I'll entertain a motion to approve, or I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as written. I think that.
Okay.
And you do have an updated personnel report at your computer.
Okay.
So do we need to say as written with the updated report, or
That's fine.
as written with the updated report?
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Okay, so now we are at board development and linkage. Superintendent update.
Okay, down there. So we're going to start with budget. You're on.
Excuse my clothing in the mud. So I gotta make a little pit stop on the way here to try to pull somebody out of a car in a ditch. So,
That was
yeah.
nice of you.
Yeah, so, okay, we're gonna start with, our other funds right now. Capital projects, as of the end of December, we were at $1,644,000. As of today, I did that $1 million transfer from debt service over to capital projects, and it, went into the system today. So we're gonna be at 2.6 million there, and debt service is going to have been reduced by, $1 million. So debt service for end of December, we were at just over $2 million. ASB sitting at 433,000. You can see that there hasn't been much movement in ASB. We're still collecting quite a bit of revenues every month, but their expenses are pretty even with their revenues currently. Transportation vehicle, we're down to 33,000. I just approved a quote for purchase of a new big bus to replace the bus that got totaled in September. Insurance company is covering about 150,000 of it, and then our portion is about 6,000, and it's for technically what I guess is deemed as upgrades, as like having the full 6-camera system in it, and ensuring that there's automatic snow chains, those type of things. So that will dip by about 6,000 here after the bus is delivered. Okay, and then enrollment. Okay, so our enrollment right now is trending pretty equal to what it has been for the last few months. We ended, well, our January count was 2,322 FTE. So the average for the year then is 2,309. Now that average gets brought down a bit because September we don't have the running start kids included in the enrollment. We're going to see this go up starting, well, technically starting in January once everything's revised because our early entrance kindergarten started. And we have 17 students there, so we should see a jump in enrollment the next time we report on it.
And unfortunately, we also had a number of students who weren't able to be here on the January count day because they needed to get their shots updated according to the state requirement now. So hopefully that will all be fixed by the February count day.
Okay, so now we can go over to the dashboard. Okay, so revenues, one of the things that is a tad bit alarming right now is our revenues are trending under budget. When we budget out revenues, there's not a lot of guesswork that goes into it. It's a formula put out by the state. So you put in your enrollment and it calculates what you're going to be bringing in for those students. The reason why we're trending under what was budgeted at this point is the state took a little bit longer than normal to approve some of our state grants that are given to us through the apportionment process. So we weren't collecting those revenues in September, October, and November. They'll back pay us once everything's approved and finalized, and then we'll see that revenue jump at that time. We're also we're about $299,000 under our collection for property taxes for the month of October, which is a fairly large amount. I'm hoping that in the April collection it will be higher than what was budgeted. Normally it's about a 52-48% split, 48% in October, 52% of the collection in April. Of course, that's just a trend. So maybe it's going to be a little bit different for us this year. We have collected about $45,000 worth of state forest revenue so far this year. That's actually much higher than where we were at this time last year. So hopefully that means that we're going to have a higher year of collection for state forest. Last year, we ended up collecting a total of right about $100,000 over the course of the entire year.
Wow.
And we're already halfway there. So for expenditures...
not that I'm like, let's cut down trees, but
yeah. For expenditures, one of the things that I wanted to point out, so you can see that our revenues were lower than expected, so is our expenditures. You know, we've taken into account the fact that we've received less revenue, and we're trying to cut where we can to ensure that we're not surpassing what we would have expected for revenues at that time. So our total expenditures year to date is currently at 33.63%. Our projected year to date would have been 34.04. Salaries were under, and salaries and benefits were under by about 4%. That was due to some last minute decisions after the budget was finalized to combine some positions and go into the year with less FTE, just to ensure that we were being conservative with the dollars that we had this year. Do you guys have any questions about the expenditures?
No.
Okay. So here's our trend right now for our fund balance for the general fund. We knew that this was going to be a tougher year for our fund balance, and we were going to be relying on that fund balance to help get us through until July, August, when we get our larger apportionment payments due to that shift. So currently we're sitting at about 1.1 million. I know that I had said it in prior months, but basically the goal is to get that blue line up to that green triangle by the end of the year. So each month we're making a little bit closer progress, and that's the goal, because we're trying to add about 800,000 back to fund balance to make sure that we're at that 8% minimum by year end. So the next, can you try to expand it? This one I don't normally give you guys. This has it's a lower level breakout of our revenues and expenditures, but I figured this would be a good time to show some more of the specific pieces of our ins and outs, specifically on the right-hand side where we can see the red. Denise, so if you can just scoot that over a little bit. There we go. Not that we like seeing red, but it will sort of explain where these variances in our revenues and expenditures are coming from. So there's that local property tax number, $299,000. There's not a whole lot of guesswork that comes into budgeting our property tax collection. We certify at a certain amount, and then it normally comes in. So that $299,000 variance is obviously having a decent impact. Then if you go down, you see that the next really big number, the $296,000, that's our state apportionment. So those grants that had not been approved and is shorting our apportionment, that's about another $300,000 right there. And then if you go down and you see that $129,000 number, again, that's another state apportionment number. So total combined, that is what, almost $600,000 that we're sort of under in revenues from where we had expected to be at this time.
So the state apportionment, though, is what they're holding back until summertime?
No, this is, so every year in order to get our state funding, we have program directors. They have to do grant applications. They have to put together all of this information and they send it off to the state for approval. Then once the state approves it, there's a whole bunch of other processes, but it goes into the system and then it allows me to make claims against that money for that month. They haven't reviewed and approved it, so we can't claim against it.
They just haven't.
Exactly.
Yeah, I see.
It's whatever change OSPI is not following the calendar they have followed in the past.
Yeah. Okay. So normally we would, like, it's really normal for September for you not to be collecting on all those revenues. It's not normal for it to be December and for you not to collect on those revenues. So we're relying on, and this is why it's so important to have that fund balance, because we have to rely on the fund balance to carry us through until we can get that money. So if we didn't have that, then there would be different discussions. So, so those funding sources, we know that we'll get them. It's just when. So that's what we're seeing right now with the revenues. And then with our expenses, we're seeing higher costs in special education this year. We received some students into the district that had needs that required more support. And that costs more. So we're seeing more come out for that than we had anticipated. And that's really hard to guess from one year to the next. And then in all those other areas where you see a slew of red all in a row, those are federal programs. So basically what that means is you have a certain amount for the year that you can collect on Title I, $600,000. So when you see red in that area, they're expecting you to have expended a certain percentage of that by December. If we expend over that by December, it's going to populate red in that area. We changed our process this year in how we're doing a lot of our federal grants, in the fact that we're trying to maximize our federal grants starting from the very beginning of the year through the end of the year, where historically we'd spend more of our federal grant money towards the end of the year. So that's where we're seeing the swap there. So, so that's what I have for revenues and expenses. Do you guys have any questions regarding any of that information?
Other financing uses?
So that is transfer from general fund over to debt service to pay for the non-voted debt.
Okay,
Which one of them, we only have one payment left.
Wow.
One of our loans, and we're done with that one. So I'll do a payment on that one in June, and then we can close that one out completely. The other loan, this is for the lights. I think you guys did it back in 2011.
Energy loan,
Yeah. And so the other one has 3 payments left, so we have a year and a half left on that one, then both of those are done.
Nice,
So,
nice.
anything else?
No, thank you.
Okay, short and sweet.
And thank you too for fielding informational questions about the levy. I really appreciate that.
Mhm.
I know the board appreciates that, in addition to everything else you do. And sometimes it takes a long time on the phone to do that. So
I'm
just
still
know that
working
you
through
are,
'em.
you're appreciated.
Thank you. Thanks a
You're
lot.
welcome.
Okay.
So
Here, here.
I made a note there under teaching and learning that you can read the Belfair Elementary Garden, and our wonderful science teacher at Belfair Elementary,
Carla.
Carla, has received a grant from U.S. Green Tech, which is a company that produces like football field surfaces and stuff, to support the garden and putting in upgrading or making it work again to the sprinkler system for the vegetable gardening. And they received that on the basis of the fact that the student vegetable garden at Belfair Elementary donates food regularly to the North Mason Food Bank. So that was very exciting, and we're going to just celebrate Carla and her work on the garden and with teaching
right.
kids. So that's really neat.
And this was a national grant.
Oh,
So
nice.
we were selected, they put it out to vote nationwide, and we were one of the projects selected of the 10.
It was the only
Wow.
one in Washington State
Correct.
that was
Okay.
selected, so that was
Nice.
cool.
Wow.
Are we getting appropriate publicity for this?
We do need to get it in the paper,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
let's talk to Carla about that, and, because it is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I'm not going to do other teaching and learning because I think we had such a great presentation from the staff from Hawkins about the mindfulness activities and the emphasis on building a tool bag for each individual student. So really I think the best outcome out of that is if kids leave the middle school and they have things that they know personally work for them when they need to come to their happy place, as the
Here, here.
young lady
Yeah.
said. That's really wonderful. And then capital projects. I kind of had to touch base with a couple people today, but we're very close on the completion of the stadium. Right now, there's a piece we're waiting for to finish putting up the scoreboard when the brackets.
Yes.
When those get here, the scoreboard will be completed, and then the booth will be completed because the scoreboard and the booth have to talk to each other. So they're not going to finish the wiring until they have all the wiring and they can do it all at once. So that's really exciting. And that's looking great. And Mark and I were talking today. Now we're going to need to look cosmetically maybe and add some really cool gold bulldogs to the wall in the back underneath
Right,
where
yeah,
the booth sits.
yeah.
Here, here.
So everybody can see that from across the stadium. But we're very excited. So that's wonderful news. And I think I'll just leave it with that.
Okay.
Yes,
Is it the plan for the class 2020 to graduate down there this year?
it sure is.
Yeah.
In fact, we're making sure that we have a really good sound system so that it'll work for graduation.
That will be awesome.
So we have graduation outside at the
We
stadium?
will.
Oh, gee, that's
That'll
fun.
be really cool.
Yeah.
Isn't that awesome?
Yes, it really is.
And the stadium, the new side, the home side, holds 1,300 people under cover. And we hold about almost 900, I think, on the existing stands. So just in the stands, without adding any more chairs and stuff, that's, 2,200 people that can attend and see things,
Yeah.
and we're very excited.
Okay, so we're at Community Linkage Planning and Message of the Month. And the linkage responses for December, I guess I'll give my report here since it's more linkage than just school board. But Dana and I visited with the Kiwanis, the North Mason Chamber, and the Rotary. And we were scheduled to talk with Lions Club just to answer questions about the upcoming levy and give them the information that we have. And we had a very welcoming response and a positive response, so I felt really good about that. And I appreciate all of those community groups. They're so supportive anyway. We're kind of preaching to the choir when we go there. But that kind of is what I did for linkage during the last month. Does anybody have anything to add?
I just wanted to add that I attended the presentation at the chamber And I was very impressed with the professionalism of you both. I thought it was very well done. It was done very concisely and didn't take that long.
No.
And I look forward to seeing you folks at Victor on the first Friday of February.
Okay, thank you. Upcoming board letter columnist. Art has January, and I think you're working with him on
It's
that.
it's
Almost
done,
done?
I think, so
Okay.
pretty close.
And then they're listed there for the next few months as well. So assurance of organizational performance and policy review, we discussed budget execution and communication and counsel to the board at the last meeting. Does anybody have anything more that they would like to add? Okay. So we are at good of the order. We're removing the executive session for the superintendent's mid-year evaluation until next month when all 5 board members are present. And let's see, does the superintendent have anything for the good of the order?
Not at this time, no,
Okay.
I don't think.
Anybody else?
I would just add that Kat Ross's new publication, the Belfair Bugle, is something we should keep in mind. And I would suggest, from my own point of view, even as, when we do our letter for the month and, for our website, that we also turn one into her, because she gave quite a bit of play to the one I turned in, and so I think that would be that's a good source for us to, publicize some of the things we're doing. I mean, it's just beginning and doesn't reach everyone, but at least we should take advantage of it.
And I believe we are. Laura's letter is in the most recent.
Okay,
one, so.
that's great. Good to hear.
So just routinely, when you're writing your letters for the month, just send her a copy of it too. How about the high school students? Anything for the good of the order?
Well, I forgot to tell you guys everything that we were doing.
Okay.
Be in a meeting, but so our flocking in Lakeland is getting moved just because we have so many things going on right now, and we don't have the student body to do it, and the weather's been bad, so
Yeah.
we don't want our kids driving around any more than they need to be. And then our dance is coming up on February 1st. Tickets go on sale next Monday.
Okay.
And I think that's it.
And will you reschedule the roundtable since it was supposed to be yesterday?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let us know.
Oh, and then our Martin Luther King Assembly is tomorrow, but that might get rescheduled depending on if we have a 2-hour delay or not.
Okay. Probably won't though, right?
Hopefully not.
Okay.
I have a real quick thing, and then Dawn has something to say out here. I wanted to say just a thank you for a letter that was sent just about our, please, let us be safe for the school days and for a snow day. And I applaud that when writing a letter to the board or to the school, saying instead of a protest, it was a professional way, I think, from a young woman to reach out and say, please give us a snow day. Not in a we just want to stay home, but she was concerned for safety, and I thought it was very well done. And I used to write letters to businesses, even though I was a stupid kid. I'm not saying that about other people, but I didn't know the things I should know when I was writing these letters. So, but I still wrote them, and I did it on my own, and I taught myself how to do a lot of these things that maybe they got the letters and went, oh my God, and threw it in the garbage can. But I wanted to make a difference somehow, and I thought that was really important, and maybe my voice wasn't at the time until I was more educated with it, but I learned a lot from doing that too, and I did get feedback every once in a while, so I thank the individual that did that. And Mr. Don had something.
I already told Dan that this was, we need to thank Bush for using his PhD.
Ah, no problem. Post-hole digger.
His
PhD. I will let him know. I will let him
That I
know.
learned a long time ago.
Okay.
On the mindfulness, that would have helped me quite a bit as a student, would have avoided a whole lot of really expensive individual counseling as an adult.
I agree.
And John, you mentioned riding bikes on the trails. We're not supposed to ride bikes on the trails because
Ouch.
making it handicap accessible extremely difficult.
Yeah, what was the deal? He was talking about bicycles somewhere.
He said on trails.
Oh, well, of course they're not on the trails,
You
but,
know, as the person who's volunteered to try to keep that handicap.
yeah, I'm sorry about
I thought
that.
he was talking.
I needed to be more
We will
mindful.
get, we will get, a
That's
clarification on that and
But
Yeah.
the
let you
clerk
know.
says no bicycles on the
Yeah.
trails.
No, and I've
Okay,
never,
thank you. All right.
no
so
wheel
that-
of mine has ever touched that gravel.
Thank you, John. We can all practice, let's all practice mindfulness right now.
Yes, okay.
And we'll talk about the board self-assessment. The general meeting behavior, I gave those categories satisfactory and our, well, actually, until the end, when it got a little out of control here. Governance principles review, the principles were followed, and all of those categories as well. So the overall meeting is a satisfactory. And again, there's no executive session. That will be next month, and our next board meeting date is February 20th at 6:30 here in the boardroom. Thank you all for coming, and the meeting is adjourned. Okay, guys, we have to quit this bird walking thing.
Do you think it really went too far?